another episode of Chatty Broads with Becca and Jess.
Well, broads, this is a good day.
This was actually a very, I wanted you to talk about, this was kind of serendipitous, actually.
It was very serendipitous because one of our most favorite guests we've ever had, John Kim, aka...
just recently did a re-release, too.
I know,
very
because
weird
it's
timing about
one of
everything.
our favorite episodes.
Yeah.
John Kim, aka the Angry Therapist. We had just re-released an episode, and then I was getting coffee, and I ran into John and Vanessa at the coffee shop, and then they have a book coming out today.
Yeah. The day that this is going to be releasing.
Yeah.
It's called It's Not Me, It's You. So they're in the studio
Yay.
with us.
Also,
That's serendipity.
Well, welcome, you guys.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And by the way, what you don't know is we've been literally following you. We've been outside your fence. We knew you were going to be at the coffee shop that day.
You know,
We knew you were, and so
You're
that's
so creepy.
This is serendipity
You're right.
to
Say we.
you. To us, it's been a payoff.
what I appreciate is the commitment, honestly. I feel needed, which is one of my problems in a relationship, is wanting to always feel
good.
absolutely needed.
Yeah.
You're like, the thing about manifesting is you have to put in the work.
Yeah,
so we've been
it's
putting
true.
in the hours to track your moves and track the podcast. Yeah, it was kind of interesting though too, because when she ran into you and then she was telling me about the book, is like we've been talking a lot about relationship stuff. I mean, I guess that's nothing new, but just it's something that, I don't know, a topic that's come up a lot, and trying to better our relationships, and a lot of audience members talking about experiencing shifts in their relationship, which I don't think is unique, especially after COVID and everything. A lot of people are clarifying their life in a lot of different ways, including their partnerships. So,
Yeah.
but it was well timed, I think.
It was. And thank you for having me the first time. Thank you for picking me, saying really kind things about me. That was very flattering. And then, and then 2 days. And then I reached out to you. And then 2 days later, we ran into each other.
Ran into each other.
Yeah.
It was serendipitous.
When did you weren't married though last time
No.
that you
We're still not married.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
we're still
Okay.
not married.
Okay.
Yeah. We are. We're not married, but we're
Consciously coupled.
Yes.
we have a house and kid. We're doing the
That
whole
was
big
the
events
phrase
thing.
that came to my
Yeah.
mind too. I'm like, oh gosh.
Was
say
it 2
that.
years ago? When was it?
I don't remember.
It was probably close to 2 years ago.
I think it was a long time ago.
Yeah, because it would have
Yeah.
been when your last book, I think.
I just measure it by my hair because I had short
Right.
hair.
Yeah, see
Right.
how long it's
My hair is down to So it was, I think it was about 2 years
Yeah, I
ago.
think so too.
Well, would you mind giving us a little bit of a reminder bio for the audience
Sure.
who hasn't met you? And then Vanessa,
Yeah.
I need to find out more about you.
You do reminder first.
12 years ago, divorce, starting all over, starting a Tumblr, called it The Angry Therapist because I thought it was kind of funny. Therapist is angry. Didn't realize what I was doing was humanizing myself by meeting people like around Silver Lake. Did you know it's exactly 50 minutes to walk around that lake? So I would do a session, and just by the walk and talk, I would know they'd be over by the end, which was great.
It's perfect.
A couple sessions in the park, taking my motorcycle, meeting people at coffee shops and all of that. And then that blog started getting traction, and then that turned into a full practice, and then, content, books, and now a baby, and adulting.
I like how you
Yeah.
said the angry therapist turned into a baby.
The Angry Therapist turned into
Well, actually, that's a really good segue because it really actually did turn into a baby. I'll give you the shortened version of how we met. It's really funny. So I always say I manifested him. And I kind of saying half jokingly because a friend of mine, one of my best girlfriend actually, followed him for a long time and used to send me his content. And I remember like kind of looking at it, but not really ever diving in. And then one day he sent me something, or no, he posted something that just, I don't know what it was. It just intrigued me. So I did a little light Instagram stalking. And I sent it to her in DM. And I was like, this guy appears to be single, lives in LA. I find him attractive. We have a mutual friend. I said, I'm going to date this guy.
Yes.
Yeah, you got to put it out there.
And she
I
was
love
like,
that.
okay. You know, at the time he had, I don't know, like 80,000, 70 something. She's like, okay. What I was like, no, I'm serious. I'm going to date this guy. So we had this mutual friend. Him and I already had plans to catch up, go hiking. So I was going to be like, hey, put in a good word. And we were talking and chatting, and I had never said a word. I hadn't gotten to that point in the conversation yet. And he goes, I have this friend that I feel like you'd really get along with. And I was like, oh.
Like, I have no idea who you're talking
That's
about.
exactly what I did.
Yeah.
He goes, oh yeah, he's on Instagram as the Angry Therapist. I go, oh, I don't think I know him.
Yeah.
Never heard of him.
Cut to this guy, his name's Jason, comes at me in the gym and says, "Hey, do you date white girls?" I said, "Dude, come on. I date all type of women." And then he's like, "Oh, I have a therapist for you." And I was like, "Come on, I don't just date therapists." And so he set us up on a blind date. That's how we met. And I got her Instagram, and I actually went through the whole fucking thing. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, yeah.
Hours. Because, there has to be consistency and pictures can lie and all that. So I went through the whole thing.
I'm like, do people not go through the whole before?
Well, people pretend they don't. They say, "Oh yeah, I like she just did it. I breezed through." No, you didn't breeze through my Instagram. You went through
I
all.
was deep. I didn't pretend.
You're like, I know the name of every family member and every place
I
you've
went
ever
to
visited.
the first day she posted something when she worked at Hooters. I went from that.
First of all, Instagram did not exist when I worked at Hooters.
But I went through the whole thing.
Thank God.
And I was in a place in my life where I was single on purpose, which was my last book.
Yes.
And I didn't want a commitment. I was willing to go on a blind date. Most of my 20s, I was in a relationship or married. So I wanted to like experience the one night stand, which I've never done. I wanted to wake up with someone I didn't like. I wanted to do, there was all this stuff about like MDMA and sex. And I was like, I've never done any of that. Motorcycles and just debauchery. I've never had a threesome. I've never done anything like that. I've always been monogamous, and so that's what I wanted for myself. And then of course the universe throws me Vanessa, and the relationship in the beginning was rocky because of my ambivalence, because I didn't know, but I did know that whoever I dated next was going to be quote unquote the one, and I wasn't getting any younger. And so that was my fear, is like, oh, do I commit to this person? Do I not? And this wishy-washiness gave her a lot of anxiety. And so it was a rocky beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess for the listeners who don't know me, I suppose I talked about myself through my relationship, which as a woman I don't like. So I'm going to go back and just give a quick synopsis of me too. So I spent many years in corporate. I'm from New York. I was in advertising for a long time. Kind of started on my own journey. I was in a relationship at the time with somebody who had a problem with substances, and I was kind of doing my own therapy, coming into my own, understanding all of the stuff that we start to understand, and decided I wanted to be a therapist. So I was actually commuting back and forth. My school was in LA, and I was living in New York, and I was going back and forth every month until I hit my breaking point and was like, I can't do this. This is unsustainable. So I left the relationship, packed 2 suitcases, got on a plane, and moved to LA with nothing. And so when I met John, I was still actually in grad school. I was still kind of making that transition. But I remember my mom saying, you're making your dating pool smaller and smaller. Because every time I date somebody, I'd be like, the next time I date, he's going to be a therapist.
Right.
She's like, all right, calm down. And then here we go.
Yeah.
I did it.
You manifested.
I manifested it. I just to prove my mother wrong.
Well, I want to ask, so the book, it's not me, it's you. Why did you both write this book? I know you were saying that the relationship was rocky at first. Is that kind of where it came from?
It's a little pithy, only in probably more of the reason is as couples therapists and just in our own relationship. So more often than not, I would say people come in and say like, fix my partner.
Right.
Right? We're in couples therapy. They're wrong. I'm right. Clearly, what can we do to fix them? And it's just so common. And the whole reason we wrote this book was really about owning your shit, right? That nothing gets better in a relationship until you're willing to own your 100%, right? Until you're willing to, as they say in 12-step, like keep your side of the street clean, your side of the fence clean. So it was a kind of a cheeky way of referring to the fact that everybody seems to think it's everybody else's fault, when in actuality, you have to own your 100%.
Have you both been couples therapists, or what percentage of that would you say versus just working with individuals?
You
I
more
would
than
say,
me.
she hates working with couples.
I hate it.
Why? Oh, I want to hear more about this.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah?
I love it.
Will you,
Couples is great.
will you talk about why you love it, and then I want to hear why you hate it.
I love it because you get to hold up a mirror. Your job isn't to tell them what who's right or wrong. It's none of that.
Right.
It's more about showing them what they don't see, and you also get to experience the engagement of a couple in the room, so it's live, right? And then exploring that to me is fascinating.
I suppose you're also seeing that each individual in another context too, because sometimes even I'll hear my partner talk about his something his therapist will say or something, and I'm like, okay, but like she's not seeing you, like, and not even in a negative way, like she's not seeing what you do to me. No,
She
not like
only
that.
sees
But I'm
one
like,
side of the story.
right? And like
Right.
also you're
Right.
giving her one side of the story, not even in a negative way. But I'm like, but what about this part of
Right.
you? Like,
Right.
you know, she doesn't know about this big part of you that I see every day, like bad or good. You know,
Right.
like she doesn't know this fullness of you because you're showing her this one part that you show to strangers or individuals that you interact with. And
Yeah.
I think I do see like with our couples counselor, it's like we are showing a whole nother dimension of ourselves to that person, and then they're getting a better sense of who I am and better sense of who he is because they're seeing us reflect back and forth with each other.
To be fair, that's probably actually the more authentic way to see somebody as a client, right?
Right.
Because we're relational creatures.
Right.
We have an ego. We're going to construct a story
Right.
of ourselves to a certain extent, right? And if
Yeah.
somebody can actually witness you when you're activated, when your inner child is clearly coming out, when you're, you know, in your trauma, whatever it is, because you're actually acting it out in front of them, it's definitely more constructive, I think.
Yeah.
If you're willing to hear the feedback, right?
Right.
Which some people aren't. For me, I'm super conflict avoidant. And it's my own shit. Like I struggle. I
It's
mean,
torture for her.
Right. So therapists, we all have our own background and our own stuff, you know, and part of working with couples for me, I shouldn't say I hate it because there actually is a lot of times that I get a lot of enjoyment out of it. But when people are in real conflict in the moment,
Right.
it brings up all of my own shit. And all I want to do is just crawl under the table and be
Right.
like, please stop fighting. Please stop.
Yeah.
Like the whole time I'm like breathing and calming myself
Right.
down.
Trying to regulate your system.
Yeah.
The number of times I've actually talked with my own therapist where I'm like, is this good for me?
Right.
Or can I just say I don't want to do this anymore?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and how much of it, like, am I really providing a service to somebody if I'm like so activated that I'm
Sure.
not present, you
Sure.
know? Although there's
You're
something
talking
to be
to them,
said.
you're like, I feel really activated right now. Like,
I'm really struggling with this. I don't like your tone.
have to step away, create a boundary for
But
a
at the
sec.
same time, it's like with therapy, I mean, so my background's in depth psychology, so we're much more interested in really what the unconscious and the psyche is providing us in the moment and playing with it and utilizing it. And so sometimes actually it can be really, really rich because there's been times where I've been hella activated and I know there's some kind of dynamic that's unconsciously being played out and I'm getting sucked in. And if I name it, there's actually been a lot of ahas that have come for that. So I hate it, but I know I should do it more
ahas for you or the client?
for everybody.
For everyone.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful.
For everybody. Right. So like if I'm feeling some kind of activation, there's been times where I've like named it and all of a sudden it's like the woman or the man will go, oh, yes, that's exactly how it feels when like they say X, Y, and Z. Like I can feel that same response. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, well, that's coming up in me too.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what that is.
Yeah.
Right. So there's something really fascinating about that part of therapy where it's like, let's get into the juicy what's coming up
Yeah.
right now. You know, the
Totally.
unspoken.
Do you ever have couples therapy sessions where you're like, or just clients where you're like, I feel like you guys shouldn't be together?
Yes.
Yes.
Where does that,
That's interesting. That's a great question.
how do you navigate
Yeah.
that?
We're not supposed to tell someone that you're not, you guys aren't, even though
We're not supposed to do a lot of things.
We come home.
Yeah,
To be clear.
right.
We come home and
don't
tell
always
each
listen.
other.
Yes.
I write
I've
them a
said it.
secret note.
I've said it.
What do you say?
Yeah.
What
I've
is
said
what
it. So
said?
there's been one client that I had, clients. I didn't say it that directly, like, I don't think you should be together, but there were a couple times where I really pushed them and said, like, I want you to verbalize that this is really what you want. Like, can we all just like brass tacks, like lay
Get it out
down
there.
all the bullshit and like, do
Right.
you really want this?
Right.
Because I don't believe that
Yeah.
you do. I don't believe that you do.
Yeah.
Like, so it's been kind of my way of being like, come on.
And what happened? Did it?
They said they did. I mean, I'll give this one couple credit. They kept trying and kept trying. They did actually end up calling it quits, but they were committed. You know, to be fair, I think they were committed to just trying it from all angles, like all of us usually do, or we can walk away and say, I gave it everything I had. I felt like they had already done that, but sometimes as a therapist, you can kind of see a little bit further down the path than somebody else can.
Yeah.
They had to get there on their own, but there was definitely that moment where I wanted to be like, y'all, can we just, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. You don't want to do this
Can we
anymore.
just all be honest with each
Yeah.
other?
Like I'm in their relationship. All right.
When there's constant
I wanna break up.
defensiveness, whether it's one person, usually it's one of them very defensive, not in one session, but if that is just constant,
Continual.
you can't build anything on that,
No.
you know? And it's also reflective of how it is, you know, at home.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
again, the blame cycle. It's if someone is always blaming and not taking ownership, there are no legs in that relationship. You're building on sand. So if you're witnessing that constantly, it's really hard to believe that this is going to continue and they're going to grow and evolve and work out for it to work out.
That answers my follow-up question, which is going to be like, what is the thing that you usually see where you're like, this isn't working?
That's for me. I don't know about for you.
No, I think that's pretty spot on. I would say that even in individual therapy too, when somebody's like ego structure is so defended and so walled off that for whatever reason, there's probably a variety of them, they can't take ownership.
Yeah. We just talked about this last week.
Like, where do you go from there?
We were kind of talking about it just in terms of, I was framing it in terms of narcissism, which is something that's obviously such a buzzword on social media, but I was talking about how like my understanding of like what makes someone be in that space is like usually some pretty radically tough shit really early on, where at the point where my description is always like they're as an adult then clawing for any like control over the validation that they want to receive from the people around them to the point where they cannot.
It's so true. I'll tell you, narcissists, when I was in grad school, there was a few of my professors that said absolutely the like kind of least favorite the least favorite client.
She's talking about narcissism. Narcissist like, just rubbing your knee.
Because it's like if you picture like just a black hole, right? And that black hole is constructed. That comes from somewhere, childhood trauma, et cetera. And it's impossible to fill. And every once in a very great while, when you can kind of crack that veneer and get in, the danger with somebody who's a true narcissist, not just like everybody's a narcissist nowadays, is that you can actually literally send them into a psychotic break. Like it breaks their ego structure. Yeah. So it's such a delicate balance because it's like you want them to hear their part, but also if it gets in too much, you can literally break them. So it's like, it's kind of scary actually as a therapist. It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so going back to what you're asking, like I think this inability to take ownership, look, it's a sickness culturally. It's a sickness in every relationship, not just romantic. Nobody wants to take responsibility for anything. So when you actually have somebody who shows up and is willing to do that, it's like, oh, as a therapist, breath of fresh air. Thank God I can work with this,
Ownership is one of the sexiest things, I think.
As
a 49-year-old, I wouldn't have said that in my 20s.
It's true. No,
Definitely would have had a different answer. It wouldn't be ownership.
Yeah.
But I find that extremely attractive. Not even romantically. Family member, friends. If someone's like, hey, listen, here's what I did. Here's how I contributed to our fight or your hurt. I just want to own that.
Yeah.
Doesn't it build trust?
It softens,
so
right?
Trust.
It opens everyone.
It expands.
It heals.
It heals. It's two arms. It's milk. It's everything.
Yeah.
Most people are like, let me tell you what you did, and especially in the intimate relationships, because that's where we're the closest and we feel the most comfortable. So there's a lot of finger pointing.
Yeah.
Okay, broads, quick pause. So there are some things in life that you can get away with putting off, like, I don't know, visiting your in-laws, prepping for that college exam. Okay, actually, I don't know if you should put off either of those things, but one thing you for sure should not put off is sorting your birth control prescription. But like most things in life, easier said than done, right? Unless you use a favor. Then getting your birth control is actually easy. No need to put it off.
The service you may have known and loved as the Pill Club is now called Favor. They've got over 4,000 five-star reviews. They carry over 120 FDA-approved brands, and they ship to all 50 states. And most brands of birth control are totally free with insurance or Medicaid. And otherwise, prices start as low as $6.99 per package without insurance. And they deliver the birth control to your door for free. They can pack it in discreet packaging, and they will send you other little fun self-care extras.
It's nice, too, because if you've been on birth control or have looked into going on birth control, you know that there are like a million different options, and it can be hard to figure out what's going to be best for you. But with Favor, you have access to their licensed medical team via text, so you can have someone there to walk you through the whole thing, and signing up takes just 5 minutes. So what are you waiting for?
Oh, and right now, when you go to heyfavor.com/chatty, they are offering a $10 donation to bedsider.org for every Chatty Broads listener who becomes a patient. So your donation will help low-income individuals get access to birth control, and bedsider.org is doing that. It's really cool. So go to heyfavor.com/chatty. It's like, heyfavor.com/chatty. You can get your first birth control care package, and it will also make a donation to help more people in need of affordable birth control. Remember, that's heyfavor.com/chatty, and you have to use that link to make a donation.
So I used to think that cute and comfort were mutually exclusive things. Like if a shoe was super comfortable, then it would be something I wouldn't want to be seen in public in. But if the shoe was super painful, I could barely stand it, then it was probably stylish, right? Wrong. Okay? And then I found Rothy's and realized you can totally have both, baby.
I know it sounds almost too good to be true, but Jess and I have been wearing our Rothy's for years, the same pairs. And we can tell you firsthand, they are some of the most comfortable shoes. They're pretty freaking cute. And also their shoes are made out of recycled marine plastic and water bottles that would otherwise end up in a landfill. So the shoes are cute and comfy, and they're also lending a hand to save the planet.
But wait, there's more, if you can believe it. Every pair of Rothy's is machine washable. Yes, that's right, I said machine washable. Evan, Ember, and myself all have Rothy's, and they've outlasted so many of our other shoes thanks to the fact that we can just toss them in the wash and they come out looking brand new. It's the best thing ever.
You can get both style and comfort and eco-consciousness this summer with Rothy's. Plus, you can get $20 off your first purchase at rothys.com/chatty. That's ROTHYS.com/chatty.
John and I think this is, it's obviously come up in our relationship. It was only through the beginning of our relationship where I was really able to put words to this belief or pattern of relational pattern I have, where doing anything quote unquote wrong, I'll put that in air quotes, meant I was bad. Like I've done something bad, therefore I am bad.
Yeah.
Right? And so what am I going to do? I'm going to defend against the reality that I've done something bad because I can't tolerate the belief that I am bad. But that goes back to what you were saying about giving myself grace. Once I started realizing, and it was honestly, John has done a beautiful job in helping me heal that, because he's got this way of not really saying it, but essentially saying, like, we can talk about this thing and I can say this thing has hurt my feelings, but that doesn't mean that you are bad, right? But until I really started believing that, it was hard for me to take ownership.
Right.
So you do have to do a lot of this grace giving and working on, how do I believe the best of myself? Because if you don't, how do you step up and take ownership? It actually is really hard.
Well, yeah, and something we've been exploring. It's also really hard with a person you love, because something we've been exploring in our own counseling is generally when one person, whether it's, hey, can you please put your dishes in the sink when you're done, whether it's that, whether it's like you forgot to pick up the kids, lunch, whatever it is. When that defensiveness hits, it's usually the inner fear is, I'm always failing you. I'm never good enough for you.
Right.
I'm defective. There's something wrong with me, which like ultimately, where is that coming from? Like the belief that you're not good enough for anyone. But when that hits, it's like you're saying, like that, I can't be bad. I'm a bad partner. I'm failing you.
So what do?
You shouldn't even be with me. Yeah. Like that's not what's conveyed. Even what's conveyed is like, fuck you, I do everything.
Right.
Where it's coming from is like
it's
this
defending
fear
against believing that I'm a shitty person.
Yeah, and I'm not good. I can't ever serve you well enough, and that's like so hard to deal with. Yeah. But the book. So how was this writing together, though? Was that a journey?
It was good. What was difficult about it was I had someone to check me. So because she's a therapist, if you're writing a book by yourself, you're kind of the expert. You don't have anyone that's gonna check you, or you don't
talking to yourself almost.
Talking to yourself, right?
Bit,
and so with this, it's like say something, and then she could check me. I could check her. So yeah, it wasn't sexy.
Yeah,
it was brought up a lot of stuff. And it was difficult, but more than the content in the book, what was important for me was the tone, meaning two people who are therapists that pull the curtain back and we show our shortcomings, what we struggle with. We opened the book with a daytime talk show I won't say the name, but it's called Dr. Phil. And the show is great. I used to watch it all the time. But he ends with his wife coming out of the audience. They hold hands and they kind of like walk into the distance.
Sunset.
Yeah. And by the way, our
To the abyss.
our PR firm is trying to get us on
I know, that's what I was thinking in my head. I'm like, oh, I want to get on this.
Oh, that is so
It'll be
funny.
hilarious.
And I have a problem with that because it portrays them as the model, the expert.
experts.
You guys can be like this if you listen to what I say or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And so we didn't want to come off that way. We wanted to get off the stage and get into the trenches, right? And so the only way to do that is to actually show our stains, show our
Right.
shit, show our dirty laundry. And so that's what we did.
Yeah.
Or tried to, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I
it's
haven't
scary.
fully finished it. It's so excellent. As soon as Becca came over today, I'm like, I can't wait to give it to all of my friends and family. But no, I love how it's written where it's broken down to where like, Vanessa, you have your moments, then John, you have yours. And it's a very vulnerable book. And I love how even just at the start, you all were saying like, this is a way to show people sometimes like the best way is to be like, this is what ours looks like. So maybe you can glean from that. And I was reading through, there were just so many moments where I was hit with like, oh my God, like specifically, Vanessa, when you were talking about when you guys were dating and that feeling of the healthy can be boring energy,
Yeah.
which to me like hit me like just in the gut. Because when I look back at my relationships, all of my relationships other than my husband, it was always kind of this like
Lightning in the
rocket
bottle.
fuel.
Right.
I've realized my tendency is to try to choose people who are obsessed with me.
Sure.
Where I'm like, I want people who like worship the ground I walk
Yeah.
on. And all of a sudden I start dating my husband and he's very balanced and has his own passions.
Right.
And I'm like, why don't you care more about me? And it's like, no, I love you. But like, I also have friends and my
Yeah.
dreams and whatever. And I'm going, well, this is wrong.
Right.
So when you
This sounds actually a little familiar for us. Yeah. I
when
mean,
you all
obviously
were
pulled it.
discussing that, it was like, oh my goodness. Like,
I mean, who doesn't, to a certain extent, want someone to worship them?
yeah.
Right.
It's
I
unhealthy,
actually
but
don't.
it feels good.
That's too much pressure. I mean,
Yeah.
I immediately viscerally go, no way.
Now I'm like, oh no, that wasn't
Yeah,
good.
maybe
but
if
it
I was 25 and I answered that question, I'd be like,
But it was the
obviously.
realization of like when you guys were breaking down the different attachment styles
Mm-hmm.
that I was like, oh, I used to try to be the person who had an avoidant attachment, and I would put that on when I didn't actually care about the person.
armor.
It was kind of like, oh, they're obsessed with me. I don't really care, whatever. And as soon as I found someone I was in love with, I realized my actual attachment style is anxious.
Yeah.
Well, you also can kind of switch. So
Oh, okay.
the thing about attachment styles is they're not fixed. It really
Okay.
is kind of a spectrum. We
Person
can kind of
to
dip in
person.
and out, and certain people bring out certain attachment styles in us.
Okay.
Like if somebody is more avoidant, you might find yourself being more anxious or more secure. You might find yourself kind of, flip-flopping. So I do think that's a little bit of a common misconception with attachment styles, as they've kind of become more like pop psychology understood. It's not fixed. And that's great too, right? Because you know that you can work towards
You have the
secure.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, Vanessa doesn't worship me. She doesn't even know I'm in the house, right? I'm like, but I have been with.
That's his anxious thought.
I've been with, and I have one person who thought I hung the moon. So in that sense, really put me on a pedestal. And of course it felt amazing and, you feel special and desired and all that. But I don't think that's sustainable because
Right.
she's on her growth journey as well. And
One day she's going to grow out of that.
and then you're going to be like, what the fuck? You don't like me anymore. It's
Right.
like, no, I'm actually
Right.
growing and I'm healthy. So with Vanessa, because we're individuals and interdependent and she sees me as, her peer, her partner, there was a tug in me that's like, tell me I'm beautiful. Tell me I'm sexy. I'm not short, right? Like all these things. And she doesn't give me that. And so I had to
I mean, I give it to you sometimes.
You do give me some. Yeah.
It's
You
like I'm
give
a
some-
monster.
You're like, never.
She does put some notifications in her phone to remind me
I do.
that words are my love language.
I have to remind myself.
Hers is acts of service. We have this
Doesn't
joke.
come easy.
We have this joke that if I write her name in the sky, she'll be like, "How much did you pay for that?" I do crave that. And so being aware of that and then self-soothing. It doesn't mean to not ask for needs, right? So if I have a need that's valid, I should definitely ask for her to
help meet it.
Yeah, I shouldn't demand it, but I should
help.
express the need. Like, hey, I'm feeling lonely, or I'm feeling whatever. But when I start to feel the tug of, oh, I need this from her, and she's not giving it to me, learning to self-soothe is how we grow. It is the tool that we have where then we're less needy. If I was to grab onto her leg as an avoidant, it would make her avoid more.
Right.
If I can self-soothe, then she comes back.
Well, and that's so if we're just talking attachment styles, I mean, when people are asking, like, how do I become more secure? It's that, right? So if you are on the more anxious spectrum, noticing when you're wanting to cling and then questioning why. Where is that coming from? Is there a need in there? Yes. Okay. Is there anything in that I can meet myself? Versus what is it that I can be vulnerable and ask my partner about? And then for me, it would be the opposite. When I feel the desire to pull in and pull away, I kind of have to force myself to lean in more because that doesn't feel comfortable for me, right? So it kind of bleeds into this idea of love languages, which we also talk about, but he's words of affirmation, and words are really, I can write words. I'm like very proficient, like cards and emails and all the things, but ask me to like look you in the eyes and be vulnerable and say it in the moment, forget it. Forget it.
Yeah.
And so he's right. I actually have notifications in my phone every few days where it'll be like John words, because if I don't remind myself, as unsexy as that is, I won't do it, and then my partner feels unloved, and I don't want that.
You should check your phone because I don't think those notifications are on.
Did you repeat? No more snoozing.
No more snoozing. I think I've been snoozing it.
I love that though, like just for even referring to it as like non-sexy, because I love when you guys are talking about how, you know, obviously with like Disney culture, it's very much like that feeling of like everything is swooning and so romantic. And if
Happily
that's
ever
not
after.
right, if that's not the energy, then there must be something wrong. Versus, oh my God, no, we're two different people. And I have to remind myself to, for me, I'm like, I have to remind myself to cuddle with my husband in bed, because in bed I want to turn over and not cuddle, but he needs affection. And so I'm like, okay, I have to remind myself of that. And it's not that it's not sexy. It's just that, or it's not that it's, you know, there's anything wrong. It's just that we're just two different people.
Right. We actually got into a fight last night. And I'm kind of proud of us that we stuck with it and kind of dissolved it. And
I admitted my part and I apologized.
Yeah, she
which
took
is a big deal for me.
Here's what happened. You guys have kids.
Yes.
And I told myself when I didn't have kids, I would never be the parent that would like schedule sex. That's so unsexy and lame. Who does that? I'm never going to do that, right?
Yeah.
And of course,
the things we
And
think
then all
when
of a
we're
sudden,
childless.
you look at our Google calendar, afternoon delight. You know, 15 to 20. And so last night we kind of decided, I put it on her because I tend to pressure her a lot for sexual intimacy. I said, it's totally up to you. If you want to do it, let me know. And then, but just give me a heads up, right? I need to take a quarter of a pill because I'm 49. Anyway, so I'm watching TV and I get a text from her. She's like, let me run to the neighbors real quick. I need to pick up, she made us some bread. And then I get a text from her that says, take the pill. So I'm like, oh fuck, it's on. So I take it. I'm waiting. An hour goes by.
Oh no.
So I'm just watching, whatever. You know, she's her own person. She can go hang out with friends. 2 hours goes by. And I'm like, dude, what is she doing? Is she coming back? I know that they're chatty, so I know that they're just talking about stuff.
Yeah.
We both are.
And
It's
so
a deadly
I felt
combination.
like, okay, now I kind of feel like, so then I texted her some jokes like, oh, you know, zucchini bread or something, blah, 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 playfully. And then I said, hey, I'm going to bed. And then she wrote back, okay, I'm going to wake you up. Like she's trying to be sexy. I'm going to wake you up. And
And
then-
you're kind of pissed.
But I'm like,
did you get kind of pissed?
Yeah, but I
this
understand
is
this.
this
Right,
is a
but
kind
I'm
of
like-
a dynamic that's
Right.
definitely played
And
out.
so I checked myself and I was like, there's no need to get pissy,
Right.
you know.
Right.
Okay, so I kind of didn't respond, and I'm sitting in bed,
Red.
red. So like
55.
And he's like, just like,
and it's very confusing because half of me is like, oh, I'm kind of horny and I'm into it, and then the other half of me is, no, I'm pissed.
Yeah.
And so there's that, and so I'm waiting in bed. Finally, after, you know, I don't know, 2 hours and 10 minutes, she finally comes in the door.
by the way, it was only an hour and a half, but keep going. I didn't
She
say that
comes
last
in.
night, but I'm going to say that now.
It felt like eternity.
You're like, I'm gonna be honest with you. Yeah, you're like,
But I have time stamps on my phone.
She's like, John, it was 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she
Text messages don't lie.
She comes back, and of course she's flirty. You know, she's kissing me and stuff, and she's already taking her clothes off.
And you're like,
and I'm like that. I'm like a popsicle stick.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just
And
Grumping
part
out.
of my head is like, I still want to do it, and the other part of me is like, I can't. I'm angry.
can I ask you what was activated for you? Was it a feeling of like,
Yes, it was me thinking that her conversation with her friend
Was more important than you.
important
Yeah.
than the intimacy that
Yeah.
we shared, especially because
It's a hot topic.
It's a hot
right
topic
now.
right now.
Yeah.
For us.
Meaning, she's touched out. She's got a 2.5-year-old.
Yeah.
She's not feeling.
I'm like,
whatever,
y'all
right?
ladies know. I'm
Motherhood,
in
you
that
guys-
phase
right,
of early
right.
child
Yeah.
motherhood
And
where I'm
then-
like, everybody
yeah,
leave
and
me the
then
fuck alone.
She's
Yeah.
got this, crazy
yeah.
Korean horny guy knocking on her door, fucking, And so I understand that. So my work has been like, dude, lay off,
Give me
coconut
grace.
oil, take care of yourself, whatever, do that, and give
but there's
her
the
grace.
emotional part that comes out. And at that point, right,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not about sex
That's
anymore.
No, it's
No.
feeling desired,
Yeah,
feeling
it's-
connection,
yeah,
right?
right.
So if that goes too long, I start to feel undesired, and so that's the part where you're like, okay, is this about self-soothing, or is this a real need that I should
this
ask
worthy
my
of bringing
partner?
up?
Because
Sure.
where else am I going to get it, right?
Sure.
So because of that, I thought, okay, 2 hours with her friend, I kind of felt like it was inconsiderate, it was rude, and she's not being sensitive to
Right.
what's happening here. She'd rather talk to her friend.
Right.
That's why I got
Right.
mad. It wasn't about the sex.
And-
Yeah.
Right.
I obviously, I got a little annoyed. I mean, as we always do, somebody says, you did this thing wrong, right? That's where I go.
Sure.
I am bad. And so I get annoyed. Like, it was.
Like, oh, I'm sorry. Am I supposed to be at your beck and call whenever you want to have sex with me? Right.
Not out loud, but she was probably thinking that. Yeah, but
yeah,
she
I'm
did
not
say.
loud, but that's
Yeah,
what's going
yeah,
through my
yeah.
head,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
And it's like, I just had this like off the cuff conversation, and we just like got caught up, and it wasn't intentional, right? So
How often do I get to connect with my friends these days?
Exactly.
Oh,
Yep,
man.
that's
Oh
the
my
mom
God,
in me.
this is energy. Wow. That was amazing.
Any mother
Yeah,
knows,
I know as
trust
well,
me.
yeah.
It's an unspoken
Yeah.
bond that
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
moms, especially with young kids, have.
Right.
And so that is where I went. And then
Yeah.
at the end of the day, even though that was going through my mind, I like took a breath and I felt it in my body, and I was like, "You're right. It was inconsiderate.
Yeah.
You're right. It really was." Because here's the thing: both things can be true.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
important for people to understand. We don't think about it like that. Both things can be true. It doesn't actually even have to mean that just because I'm saying, yes, you're right in this, that means I'm necessarily quote unquote wrong. It means that there is something I can take ownership for, but it doesn't mean that I'm necessarily bad, right? Like, yeah, it can be true that I'm also like, I really enjoyed this moment. But to be fair, I should have just texted him and said, you know what? I got caught up chatting. It's going to be a while.
Yeah.
And then he could have been upset with that, and that
Yeah.
would have been okay, and that would have been a different conversation.
Yeah, our counselor has been saying to us, like, what's really important. It's basically what you're saying is that you both have to see like that what the other person's feeling. Each
Right.
one has to be validated,
Right.
right?
They're
Like
both
you were
right.
feeling unloved. You were
Yeah.
feeling neglected. There was that fearful part of you of like, am I not that important to her,
Yes.
right? And you were feeling excited and feeling recharged, you
Yep.
know, by your.
I'm an
by your-
extrovert. I need it.
Right,
Like,
and
yeah.
you were feeling good, and then you
Yeah.
came home to feel like you were letting someone down, and then
that
that was
sucks.
painful.
Yeah.
And felt like, and like that, I think is so huge to be able to see
the other
intersect in the
person.
middle of those feelings.
It's holding opposing truths,
Yeah.
right? Which, like, whether we're talking about relationship dynamics or just like our dynamics in the world, one of the pillars or cornerstones of EQ is actually this ability to hold opposing truths. And so even this idea of owning our part, if I can hold, okay, I did this thing that upset my partner,
right.
and that is valid, his feelings are valid,
Yeah.
and I can apologize for that. It doesn't also mean that I am bad or
Right.
that I'm a shitty partner, right?
Right.
Like both things can be true. And that when I get into that space, it's so much easier for me to say, yeah, you were right.
There is also this other piece, this other layer where I felt like I was just like a loner with a boner in the corner.
Yeah.
Like I felt very stupid.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know what I'm
that's,
saying?
That's valid.
Like
yeah.
waiting in the bed, like
For
half
me.
naked, excited and just kind of waiting.
Yeah.
I felt stood up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, and I think also when we approach our partner too, like if my partner, if he says to me, man, baby, it just was really painful to feel like I just got like left alone and like,
a
and then
lot different.
if he says that, then I'm
Right.
like, oh my God, babe. Like,
Yeah.
I love
Right.
you.
Yeah, yeah.
When he goes like,
You did this thing.
you said you're going to be home like in
Right,
15 minutes.
right.
Like then suddenly you're like, excuse me.
You got it.
Right?
Yes.
It's like, granted, we can't always do that in the moment, but I feel like what's been really big for me is if he can peel back and and access and be like, man, I was just really scared that I failed you, or really scared I wasn't enough for you, really scared that you didn't want to make time for me, then like that, I feel so soft.
Sure,
in that
because
moment.
then that
Huge.
creates the soil, right? And so the big thing in the book, one of my favorites is we say you have to try to understand before trying to be understood. And that's what makes the soil safe if two people are doing it. So for me, yeah, she could have came in. I could have said, "Well, why don't you fucking live there then?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I could have said, I'll go somewhere else. But I really took a minute and I said, listen, she's very social. She's an extrovert. She's having a good time. I tried to understand, and also she lost track of time. And so I didn't come at her, but at the same time, I did say to her, hey, this is how I kind of felt. And then I think, I don't know what's going on inside, but on the outside, she said, hey, you're right. And I could see how that was for you. And that's where the road forks. That's where now we have the people coming with each other instead of at each other or around each other. And this is now where lovemaking could happen. No, this is now where...
Well, it did, by the way.
Yeah. And this is... No,
It
but
almost didn't, but it did.
this is where... No, we were just going to go to sleep pissed. And I was like, fuck, I don't want...
Let's not do this.
And also we're
Yeah.
hypocritical. And so, I kind of
Walk
inched
the
over.
walk, talk the
It
talk.
took a long time, but eventually we thawed out and we came. And then there's a tipping point where then we soften.
Yeah.
We understand. And now we're less angry. We both feel heard.
Yep.
We both took ownership.
And there's no right or wrong.
It just is,
It
right?
just is.
It just
I
is.
think that's also another thing too with couples.
We're not
that we see.
internalizing
Yeah.
it. And that's when you can then start touching each other literally again.
Well, and I think so I guess to share what you're talking about really resonates, because like something that we've struggled with is in previous parts of our relationship, it's been this pattern, and you might be able to relate to with young kids. You're also really tired, and a lot of times your only like intimate moments are like really late at night, and like what happens from my history, like there's been a lot of bypassing what I want in terms of sexual relationships, right? Because no one ever told me like, oh, if you don't like this, it doesn't feel good, you don't have to do it.
Right.
So I was just always like, oh,
Patriarchy.
yeah, and just no one. It's crazy. Just like no one
tells
told
you
me
that.
that. And so even if it came down to it's a struggle for so many women I know too. Even if it's the last 20 seconds where you go, this isn't feeling good, but he's about to come, so I'll just those little moments.
Yeah,
those
huge.
are building a narrative in your body, right?
Yep.
And so I have been really trying to seek out, like, am I doing this compulsively because I want to connect, because I'm not getting emotionally met, like,
Yes.
And so trying to figure out those boundaries, and that can get really confusing when you're sleep deprived. And so like that has been a thing in our relationship where I've been like, I want to connect with you, and then I'm like, no, actually, let's stop. This is like an exact thing that played out, and then he's like, okay, well, I'm just going to go take care of myself. And then also I can be a little anxious, and I'm like, no, we'll just come back. Let's try again.
Let me,
Right, exactly. And then I'm like, actually, no. And then actually, and it's like, and I'm getting confused, right? It's like, it's not like I'm just trying to like string along. I'm getting confused with myself.
Do I really, really, truly want this?
Yes. And
or
am
am I
you,
doing
like,
it for you?
Right.
Which one is it? I
Yes,
don't know.
and it's kind of shifting back
Yeah.
and forth. And then I'm like, oh, I'm feeling anxious, so I should stop. But then I'm feeling like I desire to connect with you. And like, and then what's happened is then he gets that exact feeling of getting kind of pissed off.
Yep.
Sure.
And in the past, sometimes that's been like, okay, I can't fucking, what's happening? And then that heat in that scenario, in that context of sex for me has become so activating where I just emotionally shut down, where I'm like, I can't do this. And then that's created like a wound. And what we've been really processing recently is that those wounds over time have led to me just totally being like so anxious of like, I don't even want to enter into anything physical because I just don't want it to create. It might happen. Yeah. And I don't want to create anything more between us, because like maybe we can just skirt around this because everything else seems to work pretty well.
Right.
But then what's crazy is in those moments just very recently and outside of those moments where I've just been able to be like, I'm really like scared right now and really like open up, or like, I really want to connect with you. And look at me in the eyes, right? Like see how badly I love you, like, and how much I want to connect with you. Right. And, in those moments where we're able to come back together and like see what the other person's going through, it's crazy how much that can be a salve on those wounds.
Yeah.
Even just like one moment of being, it's not avoiding the heat. It's when you're in the heat and you can reconnect, how much that can heal like those other parts and
Yeah.
just smooth it over. And it just sometimes takes 5 or 10 minutes. But anyway, I just really related to what you're saying.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Thank you for telling us
Yeah,
that.
I mean,
That's,
it feels. This is the thing about having these conversations, right? Is that it's so healing to hear somebody else and then hear yourself in their story, right? Because then you go, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. This is normal. I am normal, right? And I mean, this is a current thing that him and I are working through. It's very similar, you know? I mean, I've spent my life essentially being told, whether non-verbally or verbally, you know, covertly or overtly, your sexual responsibility is to make sure that your man is taken care
Yeah.
of, right? This is what women are told. You know, their ego, protecting their ego is far more important than anything about you,
Yeah.
right? Your needs, your desires, your satisfaction, anything. And I've hit this point in my life. Part of it is, I think, having a daughter.
Absolutely.
Right? Like,
Pregnancy
has-
brought a lot out in me. I
Yep.
was like, didn't know that was there.
Yep. And I think part of this is like, and John and I will kind of jokingly say, I'm kind of sorry that you're getting this version of me
I got
because
the
I'm
no
like,
version.
no, you know?
Because all her other boyfriends, she was like, yes, what can I do?
Trust me.
Right. I
My
was like,
boyfriend's
okay.
always like, what is that? Like, what about all these other stories you have?
Yeah,
these
so
guys.
you're with your exes, you gave them everything sexually at any time when they wanted on
Yeah.
demand, and then when it's me, it's like, well, I don't feel like doing it.
Yeah.
I don't really want to suck your dick in a parking lot. Let's just go to the movie.
That's like past me.
I just want to watch the movie.
I'm sorry that you know that I may have done that
Yeah,
before, but
yeah.
you're not getting that. you know?
I just we went to Santa Barbara recently, and one of my dreams growing up in LA, because I'm a gearhead, is to take a Porsche convertible up the PCH and get roadhead while doing it, right? And so I hinted to her, and I was like, yeah, this is not, she doesn't want to do it. That's not her thing. And of course I got over it, but I was like, oh, that's
I probably would have 10 years ago.
Yes, even if she didn't want to.
Even if I didn't want to.
Right.
But now it's like, you know what? I'd rather drink kombucha and enjoy the sun.
Yeah.
It's okay.
But see, that's growth,
Self-soothe.
though.
Also, how special that you can be safe enough with him to say no.
That's the
Well,
thing.
that's it, right? And so I actually, one of my girlfriends, my best friend and I have talked a lot about this, and she has said, you know, so much of this also is healing codependency, right? And I talk about this in the book. I mean, the codependent, not to say John didn't have a part in that, but this is like, that's like my jam is
Yeah,
codependency. It's
yeah.
like, as a society, like we are a codependent society. We are taught that real love looks, feels, sounds. It's all codependent, right? I can't live without you. You complete me. If there's no chemistry, then clearly it's not meant to be. You know, all of these are very codependent ways of looking at relationships. You're just this like need meeting machine that should be meeting all of my needs, you know? And so one of my girlfriends and I, when we've been kind of processing what's coming up for me, this exact conversation, she has said, yeah, Vanessa, but you stand in that, and then John's allowed to do with it what he will.
Yeah.
So the scary part about that is there might be a point, I'm not saying this is really true for you, but there might be a point, and I have to understand this, that you say, I'm not willing to sit in this.
Yeah.
And if you say that to me, I have to be able to stand in my truth and say, then that's your choice to make.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it just because it's going to keep the attachment.
Yeah.
When you say I'm not willing to sit in it, you mean it's it doesn't work for me anymore?
Right.
Yeah.
Like I want the sex kind of thing.
The
Right.
dumpster, you're not giving me dumpster sex. It doesn't work for me anymore.
Right, and it's
Right,
enough
right.
to make me leave, right? And the
Right.
hard part in really doing this work is to say, if that's his truth, I have to honor his truth, but honor my truth too.
Right, because you're loving yourself first.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
the choosing yourself, right?
That's hard.
And the thing is that I do believe, even though it's hard for John, I do believe he is getting the best version of me because I am choosing myself. We all win in that, right? I don't believe anybody really wins. You might get the dumpster sex
Right.
in the moment, but like deep down, you don't win when I'm not choosing me. And so this is hard. And again, it's like having young kids, like really trying to rewrite these old narratives.
Yeah.
As a woman, I want to have agency over my body.
Yeah.
I've never been told that I can do that.
Yeah.
And I think having a daughter has made me realize, like, fuck that. If it's not a hell yes, then it's a no.
Right.
And I think that's a struggle. And look, John
well,
is like,
first of all, realistically, it's not going to be a hell yes every time. I mean,
yeah,
there- you know,
right. I mean, that's fair.
There's
but,
compromise. And
Yeah.
do
But then we
things
get
for
into
you.
like what you were saying.
Right.
It's like, do I, don't I? I don't.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I've been there too.
Yeah. And
is
you
compromise.
feel that little feeling like that's the thing. It's trying to clarify like what that little feeling is because you've overridden it so many times.
by listening to everything and everyone else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that you're like, okay, wait, you're trying to find that in those
Yes,
moments sometimes.
yes.
And sometimes you've just got to even pause to try to clarify, like, is that there? Because I don't want to override it, right? It's like, and I think that that's where the tricky part comes. And honestly, I think it's something that a lot of men have a difficult thing understanding. Like, I think that, you know, just with biological wiring, I feel like there's so much compartmentalization, you know, and it's like, I don't know, it's just different
I also
way of
think
approaching
we've
things.
socialized them.
That's absolutely true.
Not to understand it, right? We haven't
That's
given them the
absolutely
emotional
true.
tools. We haven't, and I'm speaking broadly, obviously, and like being general, but like even John, who has this amazing capacity as a human, he, just like us, is still raised in the same system.
Yep.
He's still raised in the same society, right? And so
Right.
there is still it's not conscious. There's so much
so
unconscious
true.
wiring for so many men that are like, yeah, but this is your role.
Right, because this is something that I've said to my partner where I'm like, you know, I think about all the times where I feel like I didn't have agency. What about him? He slept with so many women. And did he ever feel like when that woman approached him to have sex, did it ever come into his mind that he could say like, I'm not really into that right now? I mean, what's the cultural programming?
He would feel
hot girl
like
in front of you.
less of a
Less of a
man.
man.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I
Hot
mean,
girl in front of you. Take advantage of the situation. She's
Yeah.
here wanting to have sex
Yeah.
with you. Like,
Yeah.
do
But
it.
you're right. The negative is he would have felt, if he did really feel that way, he probably wouldn't have said it
No.
because of that.
No, 'cause
No,
Yeah,
and he
yeah.
might not even be able to recognize it because
Yes.
there's that cultural narrative of like, this is what I should be
I'm a
doing.
man.
In my last book, this is why I'm saying it because it was in a book. Right before I met Vanessa, I met someone who lived in San Diego, and it was just kind of like a physical thing. And
Was that in Single on Purpose?
yes, three times in a row, I couldn't get it up. So like the first time I couldn't, not a big deal. And she's like, oh, whatever, let's do it. Second time, and of course the pressure,
Oh, yeah.
the locker room, you know, manhood,
Be a man.
tying
What
your
is
word.
wrong with me?
By the
Yeah.
third time at bat, I was terrified. Like
Of
everything was
course.
on this. The stadium was watching. Dude, if you can't get it up. And also, I think because I met her on Instagram and she kind of liked my work, I felt like I was letting her down. And I was like, and of course, without pressure, nothing. So then, even to today, it was like traumatic.
Of course,
And I
yeah.
keep explaining. And then when Vanessa said, you know, well, what about what she was thinking? She was probably thinking, not that, you know, he's not a man, but what's wrong with me?
Yeah. Oh, my God. Why can't
no, we put it right
I'm
back
not
on
attractive
ourselves.
enough.
Yeah, so we're both probably thinking very
Yeah.
different things. And
both feeling bad about ourselves.
Yeah.
And so, like, yeah, you're right. I mean, me growing up at, say, like age 9, being introduced to pornography, you know, sports, locker rooms, comparing penis sizes, feeling inadequate because you don't have a baby arm, all of that stuff. And then the pressure of that. And then, yes, you know, that translating into bedroom intimacy and all of that.
We
So,
all
yeah.
suffer. We all
Yeah.
suffer, men and women,
Yeah.
you know.
By the way, I meant to say this earlier, but I listened to Single on Purpose right after the podcast. I listened to the Audible version
book, yeah.
of it. And what you were just saying, Jess, or one of you was talking about the tone of going back and forth between the two of you. One thing I loved about Single on Purpose is I felt like I was really getting to know you.
Yeah.
And like, I'm excited to dive into this book and like know both of you. And I think that that's like a really special way
The audio
to
is
write
both
a
of us.
self-help book.
Too,
Oh,
so you'll enjoy
yes.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
like we go back and forth in the audio.
It feels like a podcast because
Yeah.
we're actually
Yeah, you're going
two
back and
voices.
forth.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I felt like I really was getting insight into your experience, and then there was like so much more credibility and learning to come from that because I was like, you know, it wasn't just
He's a
someone
real
telling
person.
me what to do. It was
Right.
like, oh, I can, like you said, seeing myself in the other person was
Yeah.
really cool. Quickly though, you mentioned being exposed to porn at
Yeah.
such a young age, and like you kind of were just like, oh,
the idea of a 9-year-old, it's just like kills me.
I know, and I
And this
guess
was the 80s.
Yeah.
You had to know people to get porn.
you gotta seek that shit
Oh,
out.
no,
Strings.
9-year-olds today? Are you kidding? I mean,
Yes.
are you
6-year-olds.
kidding me?
It's everywhere.
Six,
Yeah, it's
touch
like-
your phone. I mean,
Yeah.
Crazy. I didn't know someone who had an older brother. Who
Yeah.
had, you know,
Right.
all that.
I know. I guess like I always think about these cultural narratives, right? Like we're entering into this age of like no more sexual repression, which I think is really important. But I do think that there's a lot of really like potentially toxic narratives
Yeah.
about
Sure.
sex going on. And one thing that I've really like felt in my own relationship and also what I've viewed in culture is a real lack of understanding of like intimacy in sex and like what that means. And instead of just this exchange of physical pleasure, I was just talking to my boyfriend about this the other day, because we were talking about men that women find attractive. And I was like, you know what's like really attractive sexually in a man is like if you can be in a sexual interaction and if he can pick up on the subtlety and be like, is everything all good? Like something just shifted. And we were talking about like how difficult it is to be with a man who doesn't know how to tune into those cues and is just senses the shift and either can't recognize it or just completely ignores it.
Right.
Yeah. And that's like something that we've like struggled with and really talked about in our relationship. I'd just be curious on your perspective of how porn can play into that and like kind of, I don't know, like what you see in terms of how that can affect relationships. Because there's two narratives, right?
Sure.
There's like this right-wing narrative of like porn is evil,
puritanical. Let's keep
and
it
like,
Christian.
Right. If anybody
Hold to the
watches
sheets.
porn, they're a porn addict.
Yeah.
But then I do see also people being like, porn addiction isn't real, and like porn is fine in relationships, and it's good for all relationships. And I'm like, I really don't think that's
one extreme
true.
or the other.
Sure.
Yes.
I think it's unique to the individual, their story, you know, and how it affects them. But I'll start with this. Early dating, when we met, I said to Vanessa, because I'm a little kinky, I said, hey, can I slap you? And she said, if you slap me, I'm slapping you back. I was like, oh, that's not
That
hot.
was very serious.
No.
He's like, wait,
He's like,
that's not what I want you to say.
But she set the tone real quick.
I'm a New Yorker.
I think that pornography can definitely play a part in the bedroom being a scoreboard, especially for men. I should just speak for myself. Performance, not being observing those cues. We just took our first Tantra 101 class.
Oh my God, so fun. I've been wanting to.
Just the very basics. And like our homework was to massage each other for an hour each.
3 hour.
3 hour session.
That's really
We don't have the time, but anyway.
That's what I said. I was like,
I'm so sorry.
I was gonna say my wrist. Like I don't know, my wrist can handle
we
that.
muted it. We were like, that's not happening.
Yeah, but to do it
Lovely
where
idea.
touching in a way that you don't usually touch, so
Yeah.
not the patterns, but maybe like, you know, massaging the earlobe.
sure.
Just
Not
no
orgasming,
judgment.
right. if you can
Not
help it.
orgasming.
Yep.
Lots of communication.
Yep.
Eye gazing, like
Breathing.
things that are completely opposite of what we see in or have seen in porn.
Yeah.
And so this idea of rewiring. And I think at 49, I am more thirsty for those kind of sexual experiences. It's you know, it's not just about skin hunger anymore. And I don't know if that's biology, society, hormonal, but in my 20s, I would be lying if I was to tell you like, oh, I want to have stink sex, 9 hours of tantra or whatever.
Sting. I thought you said stink sex. I was like, what the fuck is stink sex?
I don't know, you're like, I don't even know that kink rules.
I don't want to talk about this.
I stop at the little lightful, playful slapping, but now, and I think it's part of also like evolution, curiosity, spiritual, being spiritually connected to your partner, and so I think your taste changes. You know, and I think also for Vanessa, maybe in her 20s, roadhead and dumpsters and all that was hot and sexy, even if there's sometimes she didn't want to do it, and that's not where she's at today. You know, so it's reading your partner where they're at and sharing, and exploring too.
Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to like, is it performative or not for me? Like, I think I just spent the better part of my life having performative sex. And I don't want to do that anymore.
We had a guest on our podcast who I had slept with, and I had said on the podcast before that he had listened to, I was like, we didn't have good sex. And then he like came on our podcast. He's like, what are you talking about?
like, what do you
you know?
mean?
And I'm like,
You're like, you thought we had good sex, and I'm a great actress.
yeah,
Most
that's
women
not,
are.
Yeah.
This is
and I
the
was
Harry
like,
Met Sally scene, right? Where he like,
Yeah,
what are you
you can't
talking
fake an
about? And she
orgasm.
fakes it, and
You're
it's
like-
like he's dumbfounded. It's like, do you really not realize how
Yeah.
often that happens?
Yeah, and then I really like thought about it after, and then actually he came on the podcast again, and I don't remember if I fully verbalized it, but what I was just thinking is like, it's not even about like you or anything. Like it was about my feeling of feeling safe and vulnerable.
Yeah.
And feeling like I had agency, feeling like I felt comfortable enough with you to verbalize my needs
Yes.
and relax and feel safe with you, and that wasn't there. That's not really a technique thing
Right.
or
No.
anything
And
like
that's
How
that.
did he take it when you said that wasn't good? Was he?
Well, he didn't. I didn't see him in the moment,
Yeah.
but he because he listened to the podcast.
Right.
They came
And then he
on, but
came
he was
on
kind
and
of
he
like,
was
"What the
like,
fuck are you
quick
talking
question."
about?"
Yeah,
It's
can we clarify
it's like,
something?
how dare you?
Can I ask about
say
that?
that?
That's
you
interesting
know?
because I had so I have a friend. I mean, I would still call him a friend. So I've known him since I was like 16, and it's been one of those like very love each other dearly. It's a physical relationship, but it's like physical when we're single, and then we're just friends when we're not single, and then physical. I mean, we've known him literally since I was 16, and we've had this cycle a million times. And I remember before I met John, so I moved to LA. He's actually here. He's in California. And we reconnected after having not for years. And it was like wonderful and lovely. And I was already on this journey, which I hadn't been. I mean, I was 16 when I met him, right? So imagine he knew me then, he knows me now. And the sex was very different. And I remember saying to him after the fact, and this is a friend, I've known him for most of my life. I am at a place in my life where something along the lines of like, I don't want to have sex with somebody that I don't love anymore. And I'm not saying like, I love you, I want to get married to you.
Sure.
Just like, I want to feel mutual love, right?
Yeah.
And even this person who I've known almost my whole life, who I would consider like actually a very elevated man in a lot of ways, totally fucking disappeared. Now we've talked since.
Sure.
But there was a moment there where there was like a disappearing from a friendship perspective. I wasn't expecting to date this guy. I was like heartbroken because I remember thinking like, you of all people, I thought I could share that with you. And I was telling you, I do
Must be
love you.
vulnerable.
I do love you. I've known you since I was a kid, and we have this amazing relationship. And he couldn't handle it. He couldn't, at least my perception is that he couldn't tolerate it,
Yeah.
right? We never actually really talked about what happened with him.
You're gonna call him up right now.
I
We're
know.
gonna say we're on a podcast.
This is
see
what I'm
what
talking
happened.
about. Yeah. And
Maybe
and-
what he wanted was just physical, and that scared him.
But
he
I
doesn't
also-
want anything.
yeah.
Maybe he
Yeah,
didn't
but-
want anything else.
which is fair, but also
It's like maybe
the-
he misinterpreted what you were saying.
Right. He was thinking maybe I wanted a relationship, and I was
Right.
just saying, I love you. I've known you since I was a kid. There's a love here.
What you're saying is I want to care about someone,
Right,
right?
that's it.
And I also think we've talked about this on the podcast before. I think you can bring that into one night stands where you can be
I
like,
think so, too.
I feel compassion and care
Yeah.
towards you as a human who I have respect for. And I want to make sure that you're okay.
Right.
Because I love you enough as a person to care about your experience and what
Yes.
you're
And
going
wouldn't that
through.
make one night stands actually better?
Yes.
At least, I mean, at least.
Yeah.
You know what's
Yes.
interesting? I have to go, by the way. But
Yeah.
you know what's
Yes.
interesting is that's not interesting. But what's interesting is as she's saying that, there is the residue, the insecurity, the old John that's jealous and curious if he was better or bigger, or what did he do where she kept coming back. You know, like there is that shrinkage in me, and of course that's short-lived. As opposed to in my 20s, that would be for weeks. But even as she's saying that, I feel that in me. I feel the jealousy, or the what did he have that I didn't have, or all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which just, I mean, it just makes me human. But
Yeah.
and that's a story I know.
Yeah.
It's someone that I don't know,
No,
but just
no.
her saying I had sex with this guy and I just did it for the sex makes me feel like, oh fuck. Yeah.
Yeah.
And my work is to not fix that for you, but just
Yeah.
to say I hear you and I can give you compassion for those feelings.
2 hours she was talking to this girl, our neighbor. 2 hours.
3 hours. It was 4 hours.
She's still there,
7.
actually.
They're moving in together. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Okay, Broad, so I don't care that it's now officially September. I'm trying to keep that summer glow as long as humanly possible, which means I need to prioritize giving my skin a little extra TLC, and my favorite way to do that is with Osea. Oh my God, we've talked so much about how much we love Osea. It's the skincare brand I literally have not stopped using since I first discovered them. The results are amazing. I love this brand.
You guys, Osea. Oh, anytime I've talked to a friend and they've used Osea, we have like an instant bond, an instant connection, because I'm like, how good they are. They have been around for like 25 years. They have perfected their formulas. Oh my gosh. Get the Body Glow Trio Kit. This is everything you need to keep that summer glow around long after the summer days are over. You get the Undaria Algae Body Oil. incredible. You get the moisturizing body scrub, perfect for exfoliating, and you get a plant-based body brush. And I start with the brush before I shower to exfoliate the skin, then I use the scrub, and then of course the body oil, locking in the moisture. It is my favorite. It's not sticky or greasy, and it's gonna give you all of the moisture that you need.
And like everything Osea makes, all of the products in the Total Body Glow Trio Kit are clean, safe, responsibly sourced, vegan, cruelty-free, and powered by the sea. Do yourself a favor and grab some Osea just in time for fall. Your skin will thank you.
Find your new skincare and body care favorites at oseamalibu.com. You get a special discount that's just for our listeners. You can get 10% off your first order site-wide by using code CHATTY10. You get free samples with every order, and orders over $50 get free shipping. So go to oseamalibu.com, promo code CHATTY10. Use code CHATTY10 at oseamalibu.com. Well, now that John's gone,
Now
we
that
can
the husband
really
is the
hear about the
partner.
real John. You're like,
real.
guys, I wrote this whole book single-handedly. Fuck him. Okay, what I actually would love to go over, though, okay, two things. One thing in the book that I wanted to bring up, and then I actually posted on Instagram, what is the hardest part in your relationship? And I've received immediately, normally questions and answers trickle in. No, within
It's just
Your
a
Instagram
tsunami
crashed.
of just like,
within 5 minutes I had hundreds. Like I'm scrolling through, people are like, relationship struggles? Let me tell you. But one part of the book that really stood out to me, just even looking through the chapters that I immediately went to, was I'm not your mother, you're not my son.
Oh, it's a
and
juicy
I
one.
would love if you would talk a little bit about that chapter and just kind of just talk about that. Take it away.
It's good that John's on here because he is so sick of hearing me and my friends talk about this specific topic. I mean, obviously he's on the receiving end of it, but it's, so my best girlfriend, the one that I have my podcast with, we talk so much about these, like the masculine and feminine dynamics and how that shows up in relationships. And it's this mother-son stuff. You know, it's fascinating because Esther Perel talks a lot about how the second the parental dynamic shows up in a relationship, there won't be any erotic feeling, right? Because we are hardwired as animals to not have sex with our offspring. So the second that feeling is there, we don't want to have sex with them anymore, right? There's a lot of things at play, I think, when it comes to this, like, we'll just say mother-son dynamic, but it could just be parental, right? Because I've seen it happen the other way around. I do think,
and we're not
like,
talking about mommy kinks either.
No.
It's such a different.
No. We're
but
talking
actually,
about,
like,
I have another child.
Yeah,
to take care of.
day-to-day issues.
and not even, and joking even aside, like when people play with that kind of like kink and fetish, it's really different than like I am having to be your like emotional caretaker and your personal assistant in your life, making sure that everything lines up the way you need it to.
I mean, so you know that there's that book / now documentary Fair Play that's just come out, right?
Yes.
So I think this is a topic that's hot.
I know
right
everyone always
now.
brings up that book, and I still haven't read it.
Watch the documentary.
Okay.
It's great. The woman who wrote it's in it too, so it's very like on point for the book. Sidebar: I didn't realize Gavin Newsom's wife is like some amazing documentary film.
What? I did not
creator.
know that either.
She did the movie.
Oh, interesting.
Who would have known?
Who would have known? Anyway, that's my little sidebar for y'all. But it's a hot topic right now, right? And again, going back to, I hate to like be the female that's constantly like, you know, smash the patriarchy. But I mean, we do have to look at the structure in which we're raised. And again, we all suffer. It's not just that women suffer in this, men suffer in this too. But we have essentially gotten ourselves, let's just talk heteronormatively, right? We've gotten ourselves into a situation where women do it all. Women are expected to do it all with a smile on their face, without a complaint, right? And then we're expected to also want to jump our husband's, partner's bones at the end of the day after doing it, right? And nobody wins in this because the men feel emasculated and the women feel maternalized, right? And no one's having fun sex at all. And no one's partnerships are really all that like satisfying. What I will say is that as somebody who struggles immensely with codependent behaviors, and I've done a lot of recovery work around this, it is my tendency to mother, not just my partner, but everybody. Right. I'm the mom in the group. You know, I was always the designated driver when I was younger. I'm always the one holding everybody's hair when they're puking. Like I'm the mom, right? And it shows up. And I'm the oldest in my siblings. I was parentified. I grew up real young.
Yeah.
You know, I was the caretaker. I was the caretaker of my mom's needs too, in a lot of ways. She was young. And so it's very natural for me to fall into that role. And it's easy for John to fall into, he's the youngest. And he's used to people, honestly, his partners as well, kind of taking care of him. And so it's worked for both of us to be like, ew, I don't like this. Ew, I feel really gross in this. A lot of times it comes from him saying what you said felt really mothering.
Oh, 100%. And then does that then bring out, this is really plays out in our partner dynamic where then I'm like, well, stop acting like a
Maybe
fucking
if you didn't
12-year-old.
act like a child, I wouldn't treat you like
Why are you
one.
trying to rebel against me?
Yeah.
I'm literally just like trying to be like, hey, could you do this? Because I need this. And he's like, what? Do you have any more chores for me? I'm like, no, this is our house.
Yeah.
You know?
Your house too. It's not a chore. It's your house. Just like it's not babysitting if it's your fucking kid.
You go to work actually, and I'll clean it up, right?
Yeah.
I'll handle it. Sure.
Yeah. Well, but this is the thing, because this is the like expectation. These are the roles
And
that we've been given.
how often have I stepped into that and not said anything too, or been like, you don't even care about researching the pediatrician, so like I'm gonna do it, right?
Yes. This is Glennon Doyle actually talked about this.
Pediatrician research.
Yes. She talked about this on her podcast, and her dynamic is obviously really interesting, right? Because she has her ex-husband, but now she's married to a woman. And so they talk about this amazing difference in dynamics. And the way that they did it, because Glennon was the person that carried this mental load, right? Was like her husband, her ex-husband, Craig, it was like, teeth are your area, period. If the kid's teeth falls out because you don't
on you.
that's on you. I am out of teeth. Like, it's not my jam, right? And so they really delineated, well, I'm trying to think of the word, by doing it that way, right? That might work for some, it might not work for others, but it's a way for you to not do the mothering. Did you make the appointment yet? Have you taken are you brushing their teeth? Are you making sure? Which we have the tendency to do, which, listen, let's be real, feels really fucking mothering.
Annoying and very
Annoying.
like,
I don't like being that way either.
and then you're also like, what, can you not trust me to like take care of our kids? And I think it's like, it's a two-way street, because weaponizing competence is one
Is a thing.
And people always bring that up when I talk about this, like on
Yep.
Instagram. But I'm like, but also, girl, step back and let him take some responsibility. Because if you're stepping in every time being like, oh my God,
I'll just do it.
Stop.
I'll just do
You're
it.
doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong.
But that is
You're doing it wrong.
codependency. So here's the thing, right? Let's talk about, if I'm looking at codependency from strictly like a substance recovery model, the research shows that if you're the codependent in the relationship, so if you're the one that's like doing more than you should be doing, enabling, like all the things that codependency, kind of brings forward, the research shows that when you start to work on you and take care of your shit and focus on yourself, the person on the receiving end, so in this research, the addict, right?
Yeah.
Gets better. Their tendency to gets better increases, right? The percentage, the risk, it's far better. Meaning, you gotta let them fuck up. You gotta let them do it their way. You can't step in and tell them you're doing it wrong. I do it right, whatever. And I struggle with that because I don't know. I am more like connected intuitively to my daughter sometimes, and I'm just like, I know what she wants before she even has to say what she wants.
Well, it's an impatience too, right? You're like, let's be time efficient. I'll just step in and do it. Let's be quicker.
Yeah, and she won't be as upset about it because I know how she likes it, because I just know her. And he'll get her all rattled and she'll cry, and I don't have time for that.
Right.
No, and also her crying is okay.
Right.
She needs to tell her dad, you're not doing it right.
Right.
They need to have that relationship. Let them have their own relationship, right? I'm also taking her voice away if we're talking about kids, right?
I know her.
Yeah, I know her, and I'm going to do it how she wants.
Yeah.
Do I want her to feel like I'm also taking her voice? No, I don't want that. My therapist actually was one of the ones that said to me, you're building emotional resilience in your child in those micro moments where you let her scream at him because he's not doing something the way she likes it, rather than swoop in and fix it for her.
Right.
You're empowering her. She's still, she's verbal, you know what I mean? But you're empowering her to start to get to that place where you can say, I don't like it that way. I like it this way.
Right.
Rather than expecting somebody else to know.
And you're not bypassing every uncomfortable moment too, like trying to make sure she doesn't experience negative emotions.
Which
also
that in itself, right, is its own bag of
tricks.
But yeah, there's so much to this. Just to kind of touch on this like masculine, feminine thing, which my girlfriend does so beautifully. She's actually writing a book about it right now. There's also this thing that happens where motherhood in and of itself, especially young child motherhood, is a very masculine energetic. It's very like, yes, there's like the nurturing part of it, but the day-to-day is actually very masculine.
Guys, speaking of, I'm getting a call from the school.
Oh, dear.
You guys can keep talking.
Okay.
Motherhood. Make sure our children are okay. Man, if there were ever a real live in the flesh example of what this is. Okay, masculine.
Yeah.
That
Right.
exactly. So people might think, oh, it's actually very feminine. It's not. The day-to-day is very, right? It's like timing, organization.
Oh my God, yeah.
Got to get out the door
Yes,
here.
yes,
Got to
yes,
do that.
yes,
List
yes.
making.
And goal.
And goal. Like everything
Yes.
is actually very masculine.
Yes.
If I am in my masculine, it's going to be really hard for me to slip into feminine, receptive, sexuality, sensuality, fluid, go with the flow,
flowing.
right? There is a natural tendency in our partnerships, our romantic partnerships, for us to want to be opposite polarities.
Yeah.
Right? So if I'm constantly in my masculine, I'm going to by nature push my, again, heteronormatively,
Yes,
I'm going to
yes.
push my husband, my partner, whatever,
Sure.
into his feminine,
Right.
which is going to then...
And I think that can happen, right, in any gender dynamic.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. It actually doesn't matter.
Yeah,
We usually,
yeah.
one is in the masculine, one is
Right.
in the feminine, and it's
Right.
fluid. We kind of
Right.
bounce around. But as a woman, and I do think this is, and I'm going to get a lot of heat for this, but this is something I talk about with her a lot. There's been so much amazingness that's come out of the feminism movement. And one of the negatives has been, in order to be more respected, you have to be more like a man.
Oh my God, 100%.
Right?
Also,
Right?
you have to fucking do it all,
You
right?
have to do it
it's
all.
Like, it's
Don't
such
fucking call me a
dis-
superwoman. It's offensive.
No, it's too much to say that we must. And let's be real, like taking care of a home, like in meals and children and all of that is a load and a half, right? And when you're also expected, like you said, to be operating in this, and masculine is a gendered term, but
It's not gendered,
right?
right?
It's an energy, right?
We
And-
all have masculine and feminine in us.
Right. And so when we're expected to do that or also be the breadwinner and the schedule maker and the
load keeper, yeah.
it's like, yeah, it's too
And
too
then you
fucking
want me to
much.
slip into my feminine and have sex with you and be sensual, right? It's
Yeah.
next to impossible. It's not a light switch.
No. Right.
And the part that I can own in that, right, is that I'm in my hyper masculine. I'm not allowing my partner to step in and do things, because the part that I can own is I actually should be asking for more. I should be just letting him do it, whether it's my version of right or wrong or whatever. And by not doing that, I'm keeping him in the feminine.
Yeah.
And it's a wounded feminine. It's not a
Right.
healthy feminine.
I just had this conversation with a friend yesterday because he was saying, you know, in our culture we want men to be less masculine, and I was like, well, the irony is that our culture is too masculine, right? Where we're always like, go,
Wounded masculine.
wounded masculine, exactly, productivity. And then he said the same thing where he was like, but then men tend to step in the feminine. And I was literally thinking about it on the drive here. I was like, it's just childish, right?
It is.
It's just a childlike state of being.
It is. And so again, if you think about it, in like, we are naturally pushed into polarity. So if my partner slips into wounded feminine, I'm going to slip into wounded masculine. If I can work towards making my way into like more healthy feminine, I allow him the space to be healthy masculine.
Yeah.
It's not that we want our men to be more feminine. We want our men to have an equal of healthy masculine, which
Yes.
is containing and
Yes.
safe. And,
Exactly.
right? And we want them also to be able to contain healthy feminine, which is nurturing.
Yes.
Because by the way, that exists in all of us. We've just socialized it out of them.
And it's also
and us.
creative and it's wild and
Yes,
it's being able to touch a
free-flowing
million things
and
at once with our
empathetic.
spider web of thoughts.
That tuned in, what you were talking about
Yeah.
earlier, being tuned in the moment, that's healthy feminine.
Yeah.
It's the empathy, right? It's the intuitive nature. That's healthy feminine. The thing is we are all born with an ability to have both, but healthy feminine is not only bashed out of men, it's bashed out of women too.
Yes, absolutely.
We believe that anything feminine is weak, right? And so we are all in this
There's
like very
no place for it
wounded-
in career.
Yes.
There's no place for it. Right. There's no
No
place for
crying,
it.
no feelings,
Right.
no empathy, no
Right.
intuition. It's all logic. It's
Right.
not creative, right? So we're, like I keep saying, we're all suffering. No one's winning in this. And so, yeah, I mean, it's like so much of this, when you were talking about, I'm not your mother, you're not my son. For me, my understanding of it is, again, it's ownership.
Yeah.
It's noticing when I get into that space, what can I own?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not giving him the ability to just do it his way. I feel like I have to be in control, right?
All right. Sorry, guys. Please dive back in. We had a call from Ember's school. We're all good. I apologize. Okay.
Very masculine place
Yeah,
of like,
yeah.
where'd you put it? What'd
Yeah.
you do with it?
Yeah.
Where is it? Check the boxes. Yep.
Is everything accounted for?
Yep. And you're the go-to person that they call.
Yes.
right?
Always.
Which is also a part of it. We're the go-to.
Right.
Why not call dad and ask where her backpack is first? Right? I'm not bashing him. This is a question of
no.
like society. Why are you the one that we call?
Sure, they have both numbers.
Yeah. It's a societal thing.
Also,
And he'd know where it was, honestly. He's better.
You called him.
I lose more things.
You
Yeah, I
called
called
him to
him.
say,
I'm like,
do you know where it is?
know
Yeah.
where all the shit is.
you took her to school today.
Yeah.
What you were saying too, you mentioned like the healthy masculine is like a container. And I was having this conversation with a friend yesterday where he was saying also like, and this role of like the divine feminine energy is also to push, right? And to sort of push and be like, are you there? Are you firm? Are you standing in your masculine in this foundation? Like, which is fortifying, right? For that other energy too. It's testing and being like, where are your weak spots? Where can we fill in these gaps so that you can be like full and whole?
So well put.
But then otherwise it's just, everything's just crumbling like in every direction.
And if I don't feel safe, right? And I feel
if
like
I'm
things
pushing
are
and punching holes through everything,
then guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to step into the masculine because somebody's got to
gonna fill in
take
the
care
gap.
of this shit, right? And then he's emasculated and feels like a child, and I feel like your mother. So there's no like solve.
Yeah,
right?
I was gonna say, what's the antidote? Now give us the answers,
I know.
Vanessa.
It's really, again, so going back to like ownership, for me, it's about recognizing and noticing when I slip into that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how do you step into that healthy feminine space?
It's fucking hard. Also, I tend to be, it's upbringing too. So like, you know, I think for some of us, like I grew up single mom, not a lot of money, a lot of struggle. It's survival.
You got to prove yourself.
You got to prove yourself. Gritty. You know, New York has a very masculine energy. So it's hard for me to step into my feminine, especially because I have this narrative that I can't trust the men in my life to be safe enough to allow me to be in my feminine, right? And so it's a give and take. It's like there have been times where my girlfriend will say, you need to then push into that healthy feminine. And I'm like, but I don't trust that he'll be there when I do it. And she's like, right, but somebody's got to go first.
Yeah.
So if you allow yourself to soften into vulnerability, which is healthy feminine, softness, receptivity, right? He's either going to meet you there or he's not, but this isn't a tit for tat. You're doing that because that's what you need to be working on. You need to do that. He's either going to meet you there or he's not, right? But you know that you'll be okay.
And ultimately, like we were talking about earlier, then that's also being true to yourself, right? And doing what you need. Because ultimately what you need to do is be able to access that healthy feminine. Like we were saying, regardless of what your gender identity is, you still need that balance. If you're only in one space, and if it's a toxic version of that or a wounded version of that, like you're saying, you're going to experience imbalance in your life.
You're only experiencing like a small portion, right?
Yeah.
Of who you
Of your
are.
experience,
And so are they. So the antidote is really, I mean, it's so much self-awareness, and it's really hard to call yourself out, because here's the thing. I'm at a place now where it doesn't feel good to be mothering to my partner, right? Like that feels icky to me.
Yeah, no.
I don't like to nag. I don't like to feel that my partner's my child, right? But what can I own? Okay, that's what I'm feeling. Let me take a little bit of a self-examination here. Where can I own my shit and say, okay, I'm not going to do that.
How can I stop mothering, right?
I'm going to stop mothering. And maybe there is part of that I have to talk to him about it, you know? Okay, I'm noticing that this is the pattern. I'm noticing I'm doing this thing. I'm going to stop doing this thing, you know? And maybe there's a need in there. I really need you to pay more attention to X, Y, and Z. That would make me feel safer, right? But then ultimately, again, it's like he's his own person. He's either going to meet me there or he's not. So it's a dance. It's like a constant checking in. Is there a balance that can be shifted? Okay, checking in. Is there a balance that can be shifted? And it's not going to be perfect. We're not always going to be perfect in that.
Yeah.
But I do think so much, for me, so much of the healing has come around this like agency, this like, I need to own it. It's not about him. It's about me. What do I want? What do I want my daughter to see in partnership?
Because that wounded masculine is also taking on everyone else's problems too, right? It's just like saying, I can handle it. I can take it on. Just like even what we were talking about with sex earlier too is right. Like I'll handle what would bruise their ego, and said like, I'll wound myself in order so that they don't have to feel that. Like it's this really kind of martyr.
I actually might say that might be the wounded feminine.
Really?
The martyrdom, I feel like, feels like the wounded feminine.
Right.
It's needy. It's martyry. It's like, I know better than you. It's hard. This is like, it's very fluid. Like this conversation is also very kind of like esoteric and out there.
Sure.
So there's not necessarily like a real like checklist, but either way, I think does it feel balanced to you? Because most of us will know when we feel imbalanced. Maybe not most of us, but a lot of us will know, oh, that doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel good in my body.
Yeah.
What's going on?
There's a lot of tension happening. Sometimes there's illness. Sometimes there's like muscle tightness. Like all that kind of stuff
is usually a good indicator.
Yeah. I was sharing with Becca the other day. I was like, because if you go into our home, our refrigerator has been broken
I was thinking of this
for a month. We have... Thank goodness we have a refrigerator back here in the studio. So like, okay, so that's where the food is, but the refrigerator broke about a month ago. And my husband said right away, I'm going to take care of it. Like, I'll get it fixed, whatever. Now, I knew he was very busy. He's been gone a lot for work. And I'm like, okay, are you sure? Because I can take care of it if you need me to. And he's like, no, I got it. And I was sharing with Becca, it's still broken. It has not been taken care of. But there used to be like those moments where, you know, he would say, I'm going to do this. And then when it wouldn't happen, I would just silently take care of it myself. And then the resentment would build up. Then all of a sudden, you know, after however many of those, I would explode and I'd be like, I'm taking care of everything. And you did it. And he'd be like, well, hold on a second. I said I would. And I'm like, yeah, but you weren't.
You didn't do it in the timeline and in the fashion that I wanted you to do.
Exactly. And so I'm like, what I've been trying to practice in like the past few years of our relationship is I'm like, okay, if he says he's going to do something, then I won't touch it until it's done. And it's super...
It's so hard.
Yeah, but let me ask you this, though.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, because a month is a long time.
Yeah.
Because even in my body, I'm like...
I know, me too.
It's been a month.
Yeah,
I've just been like...
Is there resentment?
No.
That it's been a month? No.
No, I don't feel resentment because I'll bring it up to him. So it's not that I just completely ignore it.
Okay.
But I'll bring it up to him and I'll be like, hey, Ev, the refrigerator, are we going to get that like taken care of? Because it's been pretty inconvenient. And he's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
And I don't feel the resentment because he then owns that he hasn't done it
yet.
Yeah.
So there's an ownership there of where he's like, oh my God, babe, I am so sorry.
Yeah.
You know, and there's for me personally, where my resentment would lie is that I would do it.
Do it anyway.
And then when we would get in an argument, it would be kind of like, well, you didn't give me the opportunity to do it.
Yeah.
Now, when the opportunity is given, if he doesn't step into it, then we can have actually this, I feel like this conversation where I'm like, hey, I don't feel like very like loved and respected right now because you know that this is inconvenient and you said you're going to do it and it still hasn't been done.
Right.
And then his defensiveness isn't there because he knows
there's something to stand
that
on.
he's like, you're right.
Yeah.
I keep blowing it and I'm really sorry.
So do you get mad though? Do you get annoyed? I think I would get annoyed that I'd be like, why don't you just tell me you need help getting it done right now? Because you can't keep up with it.
You know, it's interesting. I feel like
and this might just be personality differences.
Yeah, I think I think also too, I will say to his credit, he does take care of like a lot of things in certain, like, so I don't feel like I'm chasing him about everything, but there'd be those specific things that would just drive me nuts because he'd say he was going to do them and then he wouldn't, and it would just make life inconvenient.
If you were doing all the things, this would be a very different conversation.
1,000%. And then I feel like it would have to look very different because I'd be like, hey guy.
Yeah. I'm doing all of the things.
I'm doing everything because there is definitely like, it's shared.
Yeah.
But even if it is shared, when you say you're going to do it and it doesn't get done,
well, what does that make
I'm frustrated.
Right. And so it's not just frustration, right? Like, what does that bring up in you in your partnership when you say you're going to do something and you don't do it? Like, what does that bring up for you?
I think for me, what it brings up is, it's kind of this is strange, and I think it's just because of how I was raised.
It's always because of how we were raised.
It's always because of how I was raised.
I'm here to tell you.
Skip the years of therapy. It's something from your childhood.
Like always. Okay, so my mother is like probably one of the most proficient people I've ever met. She is a task queen. I am not wired that way at all. I'm very flowy and like kind of see what happens and we figure it out as it goes. And I like to have a schedule, but when it comes to tasks, not so much my deal. So for some reason for me, when he says he's going to do it and he doesn't, I get this insecurity of like, you said you're going to do it because you don't think I can. do it right and well.
Yeah.
But then you're putting it off on top of it.
Right.
And that's not the truth of the matter. It's literally him being super busy and forgetting.
Yeah.
Right.
But I then feel this like, well, if you don't have the time to do it, why don't you just ask me to do it?
Are you
Totally.
not,
No,
are you
that's
not
what-
asking me because you don't trust that I can handle it?
Right.
It's like you think I'm probably going to not call someone who's going to get us the best deal
Yeah.
and that I'm going to fuck up the
Yeah.
fridge and whatever.
So that feels a little bit of like that under-functioning, over-functioning dance.
Yeah.
Which we also talk about because I'm
Yes.
the over-functioner and John can
I
slip into the
loved
under-functioner.
those. I was reading those little things, those little bullet points of like over-functioning and under-functioning. And I was like,
That list is like so pared down, by the way. The over-functioning list, of course, is longer than the under-functioning list because I was probably an over-functioner who wrote most of it. But it's like check, right?
Well, and it was interesting to see where I related to different parts of the
To both.
under-functioning and
Yeah.
different parts of
Totally.
the over-functioning for sure.
Same.
Because there was some
Totally.
under-functioning. And actually, I was thinking of you when I was reading them because there was in the that sounds so fucked up. I was thinking of you in the under-functioning.
under-functioning
No, but I was
part,
thinking of the things that there was an under-functioning one where I thought of both of us where it said letting him do the taxes because you just like, I can't.
Yep.
And we both do that. And that's where I'm just like, you do it. I just, child shut down.
But see, it's okay to do that if the conversation is like, this is your jam. You're
Right.
better at this.
Right.
It doesn't make you mad that you're doing it. You just like, you want to do it. Okay, cool. You're better at this than I am. Like, let's all be
Totally.
real about where our proficiencies lie. It's more in the like, I don't even go there because I have a deeper belief that I can't.
that's what I was going to say. That where it comes from in those things for
Yeah.
me is
that's
that
why I said that because
No,
when you
and-
were like, you
and
don't
that's-
believe that I
and
can
that's-
do it.
and that
I'm
is
like, oh, that's
so
some
deeply me.
under-functioner.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't. I just don't think that I can. Because again, from childhood,
mom, always
could
doing
do
it all.
everything.
I don't want to face my failure, right? I
Yeah.
don't want to face that I might be a failure.
And then
Yeah.
when I would do it when I was a kid, I wouldn't do it right.
Wouldn't do
Yeah.
it right. And so
And
that
so-
helps create that
yes.
under-functioning where it's like, why would I even bother?
Right.
Right?
And then I
Because-
have him who is very much wired in the way. Makes me so mad sometimes. He can just kind of do everything
He's
pretty
like your
well.
mom.
He's like
That's
my
what
mom
we
in
do.
that way. So I'm like,
That's what we do.
And so it's like, oh my gosh, he can handle everything,
Mm-hmm.
but he'll forget about stuff. But then that's when all my insecurity comes up,
Which
where
is
I'm like,
beautiful.
maybe he didn't ask me to do it because
Yep.
he doesn't think I can do it. And then when I bring that up to him, he's just like, what are you talking about? You do all these things. What do you think? I don't think you can do that. Like
Yeah.
that's not where
I
I'm
love
coming
that he
from
says
at all.
that. But that's so beautiful though, because it's silly. We think about like, oh, I bring this person into my life because they're like, I'm attracted to what feels familiar. We could talk all about that. But actually, there's something really beautiful in that because it gives you, it provides you an opportunity to expand. It provides you an opportunity to look at these old patterns and look at those
Yes.
old shit and rewrite a lot of those narratives, right? So if we look at like, why is it that I ended up with somebody who in a lot of ways might be similar to my mom?
They're very similar in
Right?
so many ways.
It's frustrating, and also it can be really beautiful if you choose to look at it that way, because there's so much healing that can be in that. you
Oh
know?
yeah, and I think I know like we've talked about this on the podcast so much, but him and I got married very young. We were raised very conservative, and so I was 23, and I'm almost 34 now.
baby.
So we started dating when we were teenagers,
Yeah.
and so I think like one of our big healing processes have been like, oh, these are like our patterns that we learned each other in our teen and
Yeah.
young states when we still weren't developed.
Yeah.
We were processing through a lot of our trauma, which we still are, but like that was starting to come up in our early 20s, and now it's like, okay, then how do you shift now into this new part of these almost new phases of who we are? Like when you both were talking about the learning to say
The sexuality
the
stuff.
sexuality piece, like definitely in the Christian environment, it was the same thing, where it's like you have to always say yes. And then having to figure out that dance of like, okay, I have been feeling so empowered in that way and loving saying no, but then I'm not communicating with my sweet husband that it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that I'm not attracted to him, and all of a sudden his feelings are hurt. And, he's more wired in the way where then he gets quiet in that, and he's not like knocking on my door for sex. He just kind of is like,
Yeah.
I don't know if she's vibing on it so much anymore. But yeah, so interesting.
So interesting.
So the antidote is what for the mother son? Break up with them, right?
Check in. I mean, own your shit. Like I'm doing this thing again, and I don't like it. Why? what's the fear? Usually there's fear. I mean, it's like a pretty simple question is like, am I pulling from love or am I pulling from fear? It's a Wayne Dyer thing from way back in the day. And so if you can really say, am I pulling from fear or love? Okay, fear, clearly. What's that fear, right? What is that? It's like when you were talking about with your husband, when he can get in and he can tell you what's really going on, the way that that softens you, right? That's the same for all of us. So if I can say, what's the fear here? And I can communicate that, that is a very different conversation than you're another child I have to take care of and it's making me hate your guts, right?
Yeah.
That in that Fair Play documentary, she talks about this exact example, taking the garbage out. And she was saying something like she had a conversation with him, and it took her a while to get to this understanding of self, but she grew up poor, and mom was always working and whatever, and they had, she has a very vivid, constant memories of going into, she didn't want to go into the kitchen if she had needed a glass of water at night when she was a kid, because when she turned the light on, the roaches would be everywhere. And for her, trash clearly equals dirtiness, bugs, that's going to happen. I'm back in that place again.
Yeah.
And when she said to him, the reason why I like it to be taken out every single night is because like it's rooted in this. And it might not logically make sense. Clearly not taking it out in one day is not going to create roaches, but that's where it's pulling from. And when she was able to share that with him, he's literally never not taken the trash out again, because it was such a different understanding. Oh, this isn't you nagging me. This is coming from a wounded, childlike place. Like if I can see my partner as like this 12-year-old, 6-year-old, 14-year-old kid, and that's where this is coming from, it makes me look at it so different. I'm not defending anymore. I'm like, oh my God, let me take care of you.
Yeah.
Man or woman, doesn't matter. Let me take care of that 14, 12, 6-year-old version of you. Because that's what we're here to do. You know, I want to love on that version of you. I want to be that person for you. I want to support you. So that to me was like a really profound example of when we can get to the like, it's not me being a nag. You know, there's something underneath it. But it took her figuring that out in herself.
Right.
And then being able to share that with him, right?
You're making me just even think of like this morning I was sort of nagging about my partner cleaning up the kitchen before he left. And what I didn't communicate very clearly to him, but what I was feeling was our nanny's with the kids Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And she is wonderful, but will always just kind of like, you know, she feels like it's her duty if she comes in the house and everything's like out of place to put it back together, right? And I'm like, it's nice to pick up after the kids, and if you have extra time, help with things, but that's ultimately not your job. And I've said that, but you know, she's like wanting to do her best and steps in, and she is a 50-something-year-old mother and steps into that mothering role of like, I'll handle it all. So, but what I should have communicated to him, now that I'm thinking about it, I kept bringing it up over and over, but what I should have said is like, hey, I don't want like Patty to feel overwhelmed and she tends to take on tasks that she's not supposed to. And like, I just want to be respectful to her and make sure that she doesn't feel taken advantage of or like underappreciated. So like, I just really want to make sure we leave a clean space for her to just kind of like respect her in that way.
Well, then where does it come back to you, right? So like, he might not feel that way.
Yeah.
That might not bother him.
Yeah.
Right? That's fine. You know, we're different people.
Yeah.
But what happens is like, that's fair that maybe you don't feel that way. But what happens is because I feel that way, then I now have the urge to step in and clean up after you.
Right.
So that it doesn't translate to her.
Right.
Which that makes me resentful of you.
Right.
Because I'm only doing this because you don't, you know.
Right.
So that it's like my part in that is like, I realize it's my own anxiety.
Yeah.
Right. But what I would really like your help in this, because it would help me manage my anxiety around it.
Yeah. Or I could say, you know, like, you know, if you want to, if you could just like read the kids a book or something or play with them in the front yard. Well, I do it and I don't care. That doesn't bother me.
Yeah,
so I'm like, if you like, I just really want to make sure this gets done. So if you could just either do it, or if you want to, like, I don't care. Do either one. Like that's fine. I'll give you that. Like, you know, I want you to have agency in this too.
And let's be real, there's plenty of people out there that are going to say, well, I've tried that. And they come back to me and say, like, fuck off. You know, there's this energy. And that's, I mean, listen, ultimately at the end of the day, I always say, it's like, I've said this a few times, probably in different ways, even just in this conversation. It's not about their response. Like, we're not doing this or saying this or getting to that deeper part of why for them. It's ultimately about us and our own growth and evolution and understanding of self. And when you deliver it to them, how anybody responds is just information for you. What you do with that information is on you.
Yeah.
So if you're in a relationship where somebody continues to roll their eyes at you and say whatever, stop being so sensitive, like all the things that we usually hear when we're getting shut down.
Yeah.
All of us have experienced being shut down. And then you've said to them, when you shut me down, it makes me not feel safe. And this is what happens, right? And you've tried all the things and then my question becomes like, if I was in therapy with somebody like that as their therapist, it becomes like, so ultimately it's not about like the answer is always to cut and run.
Sure.
But at what point do you take their information? Like they're giving you the information and you're not taking it.
It's like someone will be in my DMs, right? And they'll be like, my husband never helps with the kids, like always demands sex from me, like just always hangs out with his friends, has clearly said to me he doesn't have any interest in being with our kids. It's like, all right, girl, you're giving me the answer like in your question, right? Like you're listing out how this person is virtually uninterested in being a partner to you, right?
And so now the work is, why are you attracted to or
Where
in
are
a
you
relationship
at?
with somebody that is like that?
Right.
It's like the number of times I get like, yeah, but they were a narcissist.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I always end up with narcissists. He was a narcissist. Why do you think that you always end up with narcissists?
Right.
It's not about the narcissist. I don't care. I don't care about your ex being a narcissist. I don't give a shit. I don't want to know about him.
Right.
He's not my client.
Right.
Let's get into why you're attracted to narcissists.
Right. What needs healing. Yeah.
And it's not to victim blame.
Right.
Right. we can all be victimized, of course.
Well, also, if someone's coming to therapy, right, the goal is to,
ownership.
how can I improve my life and like figure out how to
Right.
take ownership over the shit that I need to
not
change.
to victim blame. It's just to say, at what point do you stop and say, okay, I've done that.
Yeah.
I've been in that role. Now it's time for me to take back the power. That to me feels less like victim blaming and more like saying, take back your power.
It's right. It's
What are you
shifting
going to do with it
perspective
now?
on it, right?
Moving forward.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there's two different ways to look at things. I
Yeah.
was just talking to a friend about this yesterday because he was saying like, the powers that be, are like just want to poison us and our planet and all of that. And I was like, well, what if we just like reframed that and we could still talk about the powers that be, but like the powers that be don't want us to know that we have the
agency
power and the agency
Yes.
to change our environments and to be in community with each other where we create healthy, right? So it's like those are two different ways of saying the same thing. And if you look at it from a different perspective.
I don't want to be in the Matrix anymore, right?
Right.
This is this whole conversation a lot of us are having where it's like, I see the Matrix.
Yes.
I see what's happening.
Yeah.
I know what's going on.
Right.
I'm choosing to step back.
Right.
We're still in this society. You can't not be. But like, I'm going to see it for what it is. And I'm going to choose to say, yeah, there are still powers that be, of course.
Sure.
But like, what's my role?
Well, and I
What
think
can
that
do differently?
the shift in that is creativity, right? Because when you take on creativity, which is healthy feminine, I think, then you're like, what are the alternatives here? How can I look at this from a different way?
angle. Instead of pushing through it, I can be like, what are some interesting ways to approach this?
Right. How can I look at myself and see what's there when we're talking about these relationships? How can I see what's there? How can I shift my perspective on how I'm approaching these situations or these relationships?
Yeah.
I also think like to the other side of that, where we're saying sometimes it's very clear where you're like, dude, this guy's where he's at in his life right now is not good and you need to step away from this. This is going to suck you in a vortex for the next 10 years of your life or whatever. Because sometimes that is what it is. But also, I am guilty of being like, I've tried to be my higher self for about 2 weeks.
It's not working. They're not changing.
Yeah, exactly.
Why hasn't
When's
he
he
changed?
ready to step into his higher self? And I've done it for about 3 hours every day for the past 2 weeks. And then the rest of the time I kind of go back into my unhealthy patterns. But like, I don't see him putting in the effort,
Yep.
something's not right here. I also know that myself and a lot of people I know are also guilty of that. And sometimes that shit takes time. And like you gotta just, you gotta keep on working on yourself if you're not in a situation where you're really being like poisoned and dragged down by that relationship. If you have something that's worth
Like
trying
putting in the effort.
for, putting in the effort for, then it's like sometimes you gotta just really focus in on your own lane and see where that takes you.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
But anyway, well, thank you so much for coming, Vanessa.
Oh
and
my
obviously we
goodness.
told John thank you too.
I know.
but
Thank you to John as well, but it's so nice that we get to spend
this
chat
was
with
good.
you.
Would you please plug? You have your
Yes.
book, but then also you
Plug
mentioned you have a
away.
podcast, so I'd like to hear about that and where we can
Yeah.
find you each on socials and yada yada yada
So
yada.
John
yada.
is the angry therapist across everything, right? Same with this podcast. So my podcast is called Cheaper Than Therapy. My girlfriend and I are both depth psychologists, so like it's a lot of very esoteric, let's get into it. Not a lot of like more behavioral stuff. It's a lot more like spiritual conversations
Love
and
it.
things like that from a psychology perspective. And then I'm on.
What is that you're saying? Depth or depth? Depth psychology.
Yeah,
Okay.
so Jungian.
I'm not familiar with that term.
Jungian
got it.
psychology.
Okay.
Yeah, depth psychology is Jungian psychology.
Okay.
And then Instagram, Vanessa S. Bennett. It was my private, and then it became my public, so it's just the same name. No pithy branding there. Instagram, I'm actually on there as the Coda Yoda. All things codependency. And then, our book is...
The Coda Yoda.
Coda Yoda.
How do you
I
spell
love
that?
that.
CODAYODA.
Okay, fun.
Yeah. And then the book comes out September 6th.
Which
Today.
is today.
This is episode is
shit,
dropping
that's right.
today. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
It's not me, it's you. Anywhere you can get your book?
Yeah, anywhere. Amazon,
I'm going to be getting the Audible,
Target,
though, because I
and
love
the
that
Audible.
idea of listening to you both.
Oh, I
it's
cannot
fun.
wait. Well, we'll have all of that in the episode notes, broads. We so appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Appreciate
Chat
you both.
soon.
We chat soon. Chat soon.